Okay, hello again, everybody. My name is Chris Wells. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager. It's now 6:32. We gave everybody a couple of extra minutes to log on, but in respect of the 28 of you who are already logged on as attendees, we're going to go ahead and get started. Real brief, I'll just give a quick introduction as to what this is, where we are, and what we're looking to accomplish tonight. And then I'll introduce our two presenters, Deputy County Executive Rachel Flynn and the Active Transportation Planner on my staff, Nicole Winans. What we're doing tonight is the Active Fairfax Transportation Plan Vision, Goals, and Objectives meeting. The Active Fairfax Transportation Plan is an effort to combine the Bicycle Master Plan and the Countywide Trails Plan. The Countywide Trails Plan is just a map, but the Bicycle Master Plan is also a map and a policy document. And so the intent of the Active Fairfax Transportation Plan is to combine those two into one combined comprehensive plan guidance for the county, for developers. And we're also introducing things such as a pedestrian element and a safety element. Where we are in the process is we're at the end of phase one, and the presentation tonight is the vision, goals, and objectives. That is sort of the broad, high-level guiding principles of the work that we'll continue to do as we move into phase two. Phase two is when we take the public input we've received from surveys and meetings and everything that we've achieved so far, and actually work through the comprehensive plan process of redoing the map into one map and introducing policy elements into the plan. And then there'll also be some standalone policy elements, things for staff. We've also pulled out separately a Safe Streets for All plan that we're taking to the board separately because the Board of Supervisors has asked us to accelerate the safety element that is part of this. And so some of that safety element can go into comprehensive plan guidance, but much of it can be standalone workflows that we can begin on. So with that, I'll again remind us that the reason we're here tonight is the vision, goals, and objectives. So I know there's always a lot going on in Fairfax County with regard to transportation and active transportation, but we'd ask you to focus on the vision and goals and objectives statements and the wording of those, because what we're really looking to accomplish tonight is to get feedback on the wording of those and on these guiding principles. Are we on the right track with our guiding principles? Did we miss anything? For instance, we already got a comment from one of our Trails, Sidewalks, and Bikeways committee members that the word trail simply wasn't prominent enough in some of that. And that's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for. So that's what we want to focus on tonight. The simple agenda will be our Deputy County Executive will give us an introductory presentation on how we got to where we are and what we want to really be doing. Then Nicole Winans will break down the work that's been done thus far, and then we'll have a question and answers session where you all can have an interactive part with us. So with that, I'll hand it over to our partner in this, our department's Deputy County Executive, Rachel Flynn. Thank you, Rachel. I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to, for some reason this isn't coming up, so I'm gonna share, try this again. Wait for the delay. All righty. And you can see that, I hope?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So as Chris said, we're here tonight to share the objectives and goals for the phase 1 of the active transportation process. And I applaud staff for all their hard work on this effort. It's been many months, many meetings, a lot of work. So kudos to all of you for getting us here. So I wanted to talk about why active transportation is so important. I know we all have different ideas in our minds about what it means, but it really affects so many things. It's not just taking a walk or a bike ride or hopping on transit. It's really about placemaking, how we design our streets, how we get to places is really critical. Active transportation affects our health, the environment, and actually our economy. And oh boy, this is not advancing. Sorry about that. Not sure what's going on here. Anybody know if there's a special button I should be hitting? Not. Can you see my cursor moving in the first screen?
We can. Maybe try to reshare.
Reshare. How do I do that? What do I hit?
At the top of your screen. Yeah, there you go.
What if I just do it the old-fashioned way? You can see these, right?
It works. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So why are we focusing on active transportation? Really to shift from our dependence on the automobile to more multimodal travel, and to make sure that all pedestrians and cyclists and transit users are safe. Fairfax has a 71% rate of what we call drive alone to work, or SOV, single occupant vehicle rate. And that really is too high if we want to be more balanced and have that healthier community, respect the environment and whatnot. And we really want to bring this down to 50%. So to put it in a nutshell, we have really 4 kinds of streets. You could break that down further, but for our purposes, we'll talk about those. So limited access highways like the Beltway, 66, 95. We're really not addressing that because we don't have pedestrians and cyclists getting on the Beltway or trying to cross. We will have cycle tracks along the new 66, the widened version, but for the most part, we're not talking about limited access highways. Our local streets are actually pretty good. So you think about Reston Town Center, Mosaic, Fairfax Corner, places like that. They're right-sized, pedestrians feel comfortable, the speeds are appropriate. It's really the middle two, so arterials and collectors. This is 123. And it's a lot of it has to do with how the county was built and formed and developed over time. And so I wanted to explain how we got here. So a brief history of roads and streets in 2 minutes or less. So from the 1700s, when Fairfax first became a place, to today. Back then, for really 2 centuries, this is what most of our roads look like. Going from farm to market, or from, say, Leesburg to Alexandria. This is what most people experienced. There was no paving, no widening. It was really just by foot or by horse was how you got around. Later trains came, but predominantly by foot or by horse. And you can see the main routes. Here is Route 1. This is 50. Here's 29. And then Route 7, obviously. And then 123 kind of works its way through here. Those were the major routes in the 1700s and then even into the 1800s. And then you had lots and lots more roads, country roads really just start to fill up in between all those farms and forests. But we didn't really plan Fairfax in the way that you see here with Alexandria and DC, of course, where they took a chunk of land and laid a grid down, and it became quite walkable, and it was a very different place. And it's not to blame Fairfax, it's just how often suburban areas developed over time. It was farms and forests, an occasional village, and later, much later, we just couldn't foresee it. It became a place where there were 1.2 million people. So here you see the plan for Alexandria. It was actually designed by George Washington. He did the first plat. Here it's about 14 by 20 blocks, very walkable, mixed use. Everyone could get around, get down to the port, another mode of travel, and the canal at this time was coming in the early 1800s. So it prospered economically. There was a real sense of place. There was a hierarchy of where City Hall was, the churches, the homes, the schools, people's businesses. It was quite successful. Same thing here in DC. L'Enfant laid this out in late 1700s, and slightly different grid with the radials and the hierarchy of the Capitol and the White House, whatnot. But it too was a very multimodal, mixed use area, really active transportation, what we're trying to get back to, which is how cities developed for 7,000 years. And of course, that all changed with this little machine here called the car. Everyone meant well, but it definitely changed how this kind of street, where you have the pedestrian as the highest priority, was shifted. They even had bikes back then. This probably taken about 1900. You can still see horses. And of course, the streetcar, which came about 1880s, and most of them got pulled up by the 1940s. So truly, multimodal, mixed use, active transportation. And then with the advent of the car, really mass production by Ford, and everybody wanted one, land development patterns really changed. The grid was no longer needed because time and space with the car is very different. We started changing how we placed buildings, where we placed them. Here you can see the mall. So rather than Main Street mixed in with other uses, it's a single use. You have offices in another area, you have subdivisions in another area. And this was how many suburban places grew over time. We, of course, relied on major limited access highways. So when the Beltway went in the 60s, it was 4 lanes, actually. We didn't expect it to grow so quickly, but there was such dependence on these major arterials that we doubled them within 15, 20 years. And then same thing with our arterials. This was a country road, like I showed you on that map with the red line. It was a 2-lane country road that's now about 9, 10 lanes wide to accommodate a concentration of cars because the grid was no longer there in our area. And you can see it here, this massive scale that DC could fit actually from here to here. So it was focused, this is the Beltway, here's Dulles access. So it was focused on those major limited access highways, arterials, collectors, rather than that fine grain of the grid. And of course, this is what happened. We got traffic. It wasn't something that had ever happened in the world. It wasn't a term. We didn't really know that this could happen. And by learning through experience and decades of this, we now know so much more, which is why we're starting to shift our focus back to more pet activity, cyclist activity, and transit use. This was an interesting a book called Fighting Traffic. UVA professor Peter Norton wrote about the advent of the automobile and what it did to the American city. And he talks about how the street always belonged to everybody. It wasn't just a car. It was a playground. It was a marketplace. It was a social gathering square, really, plaza, if you will. And it was for travel. You can see here people still getting through. But it was so many things built into one. But we really shifted from the street as a place for all people to use wherever they wanted. Like in this footage from 1906 is when we believe it was taken, right before the earthquake in San Francisco. And you can see here how everybody is using the street as they will. And whether it's a pedestrian or a cyclist coming along, or a car or a streetcar, more pedestrians, the horse. Everybody had the right to use, another horse, wagon. Everyone had the right to use the street, cross wherever they wanted, catch a streetcar, just cross the street. But that all changed with the proliferation of automobiles, but also the increased speed. At this time, cars could only go about 10 to 15 miles an hour. And that shifted. So they had to then change who could use the street, who had the right. And that's when jaywalking became an issue. A jay was a person who was kind of an unsophisticated person, and only an unsophisticated person would just cross the street wherever they wanted, right in front of a car, as you can see in this poster. We had to send them to the crosswalk, and that's where you crossed. Children can no longer play on the street. And so it really shifted it and said, okay, automobiles are the highest priority. And for safety, that made sense. But then we realized in many ways what we lost. You can see here, this is an image from Richmond in 1910, and people would just walk out in the middle of the street, get on a streetcar. Pedestrians were the predominant focus. There are probably some bicycles here, but you can't see them in this photo. But 100 years later, this exact same spot, when I was planning director there, I went and looked for where this place was, and this is what it looks like today. And the reason was because we got rid of the buildings for parking lots, we pulled up the streetcar and changed the focus, and there was flight out to the suburbs. People just wanted greener pastures. They wanted their own yard, they wanted their own house. And so with the advent of the subdivision and the ability to buy a home with the GI Bill and whatnot, people went out. My parents did that. Many of our families did that. But people were still shopping and working downtown. The streetcars were still around in DC in the 30s, but cars were starting to become more and more dominant. And then with the, what they say is retail follows rooftop. So with all those people living out in the suburbs, retail started to follow. And this was the Seven Corners Shopping Center, one of the first modern shopping centers in the DC area. It was a big deal. It was shiny and new, and everyone wanted to be there, and who wanted to go downtown. But one of the challenges was what happened with the road network. So what were simple country roads that just crossed then became very complex motorways. And the pedestrian just wasn't the highest priority. If you lived near here, you hopped in your car and you drove over to the Seven Corners Shopping Center, or if you worked here, you did the same. It wasn't about the pedestrian anymore. And so I'm going to shift focus. So what does a futon and an arterial have? What do they have in common? Well, a futon is a lousy bed and it's a lousy sofa. And an arterial is a lousy place and has lousy traffic. And so how do we address that? We can change how we decide to use our streets. If there's a certain amount of space for certain uses and people, and so you can shake it up like the one on the right, where pedestrian, cyclists, drivers commingle to get to a multitude of places, homes, businesses, schools, whatnot. Or you can say, well, it's really all for cars, and the rest of us will have to figure it out. And really, that's what this active transportation is about. Is it going to be this, or is it going to be this? And I think we all know what we're eager to see. But one of the things driving it is how we do traffic modeling. And so I'm sure many of you in your neighborhoods, you'll hear about, well, is that intersection an A, B, C, D, E, or F? This is a system level of service that was or LOS created in the 1950s by engineers who meant very well. And they said, well, if you have to wait at a traffic light for less than 10 seconds, you get an A. If it's more than 80 seconds, you get an F. And that's not okay. But what we didn't realize were the ramifications of that. And so here you can see how a lot of thought and effort and money goes into creating these models, and where people turn left, turn right, and inevitably what will happen is we will widen the road. And we see this over and over, but at the expense often of the pedestrian, because you can see now where they had to cross from here to here. Now they got to cross from here to here, wider roads often mean higher speed roads. And so we're starting to really rethink all this and say, well, wait a minute, who are these roads really for? And how can we balance it? Not that there won't be cars, of course they will be. And whose perspective do we value? So here you can see in the LOS model, this street in Old Town is an F, because they're going to have to wait more than 80 seconds. And this one's an A, this is Route 29, where you can get through quite easily. Whereas an economist or someone interested in placemaking would say, no, this is the A, and this is the F. So through decades and decades of experimentation and learning, we're now saying, well, maybe we should rethink this. And who gets the priority on our streets and roads? It's been proven that LOS methodology actually induces more traffic because we're getting more people to come out. When you widen the road, then more people fill it, and we never really solve for the congestion we're trying to solve. They meant well, but other problems came up that no one could have foreseen. And one of those is that we're just driving more. So our driving per person has gone up about 20%. And so in that sense, we know we're not solving it. So with the single occupant vehicle rate and this miles per person, these are the figures and those data points we want to bring down through active transportation. And part of it is how we do our street grids. We're creating a grid in Tyson's now. There's already one in Reston Town Center and other places, as opposed to the typical subdivision where if I live over here and I want to get down to here, I have to go out on the collector or the arterial, and it takes longer. And often if it's a child, the parents will say, you're not going out on that arterial, I'll drive you. And that's not good for any of us. The parents have better things to do and the children want independence. And so these are some of the things we're looking at. And like I said, it's affecting our health. And through addressing LOS, street design, and really promoting active transportation, we will be healthier. Here you can see what LOS created, and it's very hard to find a pedestrian here, but there he is. The other issue is that safety. Over 40,000 people die every year in the US. In our own county, we have about 15 to 18 who die each year. And we think many of those are avoidable. Here is a case. This is the gateway to the Mount Vernon area, but it's not pedestrian oriented. It's 11 lanes wide to get you through, not to. And so we want to change that. Do we want people to just fly through Fairfax, or do we want them to come in, stop, enjoy our goods and services in our neighborhoods? As a result, a woman jaywalked here and was killed at that point, Ms. Alston. Same thing here, Mrs. Zante decided to jaywalk because our crosswalks are a bit too far apart, and oftentimes people just say, forget it, I'm going to go for it. And this was Mr. Yaboa. He was living at the shelter on the right and going over probably to the fast food place. And as you can see, there are many, many lanes here, and cars are going quite heavy, quite fast, heavy traffic. And we just know we can do a better job. Our residents deserve better than this. And to create that place and really think about humanizing our streets. Oftentimes, there's just no place to cross, and that's a big part of what we're working on. And we know this is affecting people of color more, lower income people, seniors. And this is becoming very important to our community, certainly our board with One Fairfax. And now that we know these things, we can start to address them. And I know staff in Fairfax and our electeds and appointeds really care about this issue. We also know that speed matters in terms of whether you will survive. If you are hit by a car, if a car is going 20 miles per hour, you have a 90% chance of survival. But at just 40 miles an hour, which doesn't seem that fast, you only have a 10% chance. So getting that speed down is really important. So you remember that view of the 11 lanes of the gateway to Mount Vernon. This is the same road, Route 1 National Highway, but this is the gateway to Alexandria. They've decided to make it 6 lanes. and humanize it more, have the sidewalks closer, the crosswalk shorter. It slows down the speed and ensures that people will be safer. Here's another example of an arterial, this one in DC, Connecticut Ave. Most of these major arterials in DC, like Wisconsin, Mass Ave, Connecticut, are no wider than 6 lanes. They removed the on-street parking during peak, and some of them, they changed the middle lane during morning rush hour or evening to make accommodation. But what you can start to see here is that it's more inviting and comfortable for peds and cyclists. Mixed use development starts to occur. So if you live here, you're likely to walk to these places. Here's a grocery store across the street, rather than hop in your car. And add to that the inducing. So if this was 10 or 11, 12 lanes, probably people would be driving more. You just wouldn't, pedestrians and cyclists know where they're wanted, and you just wouldn't feel wanted if the domination was for the cars. The other thing about streets and roads and places is that they're great civics places and spaces. And it sends a message to our citizens and businesses who, what do we think of you? How do we value you? What are the places we're creating that we want you to enjoy to induce the ped and cyclist and transit use? And streets and roads can be quite beautiful. So we can create streets that are great places, induce more ped, cyclist, transit travel, and spur the economy. So how? So basically, we're looking at replacing LOS with other measures. Our deputy director under Tom Bishadny, Greg Steverson, is heading up an effort. He's been putting many, many hours into this, meeting religiously with a stakeholder group from our DOT, our Department of Planning, and also VDOT. And I'm really eager to see what we come up with. There have been other states and localities that have done this and shifted the focus from just cars to all travelers. We want to slow the speeds. We want to limit the widths of roads. We want to add on-street parking. It actually calms traffic and it helps small businesses that are on that road. We want to add more crosswalks. So every 300 to 500 feet is really what it should be, like you saw in Old Town, like you see in DC. Better sidewalks and bike lanes. Shade trees are enormously important. First of all, they make people feel better. They want to be on that street. In the summer, it feels better. And then it actually calms traffic. Driver, usually subconsciously, when it's a tree-lined street, we'll go a little slower, and it sort of calms us. And then place buildings close to streets rather than have a big parking lot right in front. So this is an example of one of those streets. We call it a complete street that Nicole will be talking about, but you've got reasonable width for the through traffic for the vehicle. You've got transit, you've got focus on pedestrians, good sized sidewalks, street trees. This is one of the images from the Tyson's plan. And my hope is that that image you saw of 123, it could become this one day. And so a big part of this is ActiveFairfax plan, again, that all that I've been telling you about led us to this. And again, my hope is that we have this kind of complete street in as many places as possible for all of our citizens to travel as they wish in an affordable, safe, convenient way. So I'll turn it back to you, Chris or Nicole, and thank you for letting me share.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Thank you for your support and inspirational background from all of your work in these areas, and helping to set the stage for where we want to go for us in our county in the future. So with that, I'll go ahead and quickly pass it off to Nicole Winans. Nicole is the program manager for this this effort, the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan. She's managing the consultant that's doing the work on this, and she will go over where we are tonight, and how we got to the vision and goals, and where we are with the vision and goals. Nicole.
All right, thank you so much, Chris, for the introduction. Let me share my screen. And I hope it's going to work for me. All right. So first, I want to go over some of the meeting logistics, since we're meeting virtually. Of course, we would have loved to see everyone in person, but due to the pandemic, we are basically forced to meet online, which also has its positive. It's easy to join via the computer and not having to travel somewhere, but it does require a little bit of a meeting format. So first of all, and we would like to mention that this meeting is recorded, and the recording will be available on the project website. The link is listed here. And at the end of my presentation, we will have time to answer questions and listen to your feedback. And the way to participate is to use the Q&A feature that this format offers. You can see on the lower right of your computer a Q&A button. If you click on that, you can enter a question or comment or feedback into the box anytime during this presentation. But again, as Chris mentioned, we ask that you try to focus on the vision, goals, and objectives that we will be discussing. But of course, if you have any other questions, you may share those as well. And we will try to get to all your questions verbally, but we may also answer some questions in the chat. And if you would like to speak at the end of the meeting and ask your question verbally or provide comment, you can raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand button, like a little wave button at the bottom of your screen. You can click that. If you're calling in today, you can press *3 in order to raise your hand. And we ask that you press the same buttons again after you have spoken to take down your hand, so we know that you don't have another question. All right, let's look at the agenda of my presentation today. So I will provide a little bit of background about the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan project, and then provide some summary of what we heard from all of you in the spring public engagement we did. So we had a survey and some interactive maps that the public was able to use, and we got some great insights into what Fairfax County residents are envisioning active transportation to be like in the future, and current issues with active transportation, particularly barriers as well. And then we will go over the meat of why we're here today, which is the draft vision that the project developed, as well as 4 goals and objectives that are kind of defining the goal a little bit further. And then again, at the end, we'll have time for comments and questions. So onto the project background. So what is the goal of this plan? So Chris summarized it. We are combining existing plans, but we also want to update it. So the whole point is to create a comprehensive network of sidewalks, bikeways, as well as trails, and that's both paved trails and natural surface trails. There will be a focus on making our roads safer for all users, but particularly pedestrians and cyclists. As Rachel mentioned, the complete streets, so not just the infrastructure, the pavement on the ground, but what else do we need to really truly complete our streets and make those enjoyable places for pedestrians and cyclists, but also for drivers and of course the surrounding community to enjoy. We are looking at policies as on the local level as well as the state levels, and laws that influence active transportation, either from a safety perspective or from a design perspective, and provide some recommendations on how those could be adjusted in the future in order to address active transportation needs better. We will have some recommendations for programs internal to the county on encouraging active transportation, educational programs, events that we could host, as well as a look at, we have such a big need in the county. How do we spend the funds that we have in the best possible manner to address the most urgent needs when it comes to active transportation infrastructure and improvements. But first, I would like to start by defining active transportation. That's not just in the title of the project, and we have heard about this in the previous presentations, but it's still important to make sure that we all know what that means. So the definition is that it's mostly human-powered travel. That includes walking, biking, rolling, so that could be on a scooter, in a wheelchair, in a stroller, hiking, going out for a run, or even riding a horse. So we do have equestrian uses as part of this plan as well. And all this travel could happen for either for utilitarian purposes, transportation from point A to point B, or for recreational purposes, just going out for a stroll to enjoy nature, or have a social interaction with a friend.
Cole,
Yeah.
speak up a little bit. We have some people having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Okay, let me adjust my microphone a little bit. Okay, so here are two examples of active transportation, just to show it can be, just a fully human-powered walking is the most basic form. But on the right here, you see scooters, which can be electric. So the exception to the human-powered is these micromobility vehicles that are have a small electric engine in order to move someone forward. The scooters are now in Fairfax County and are becoming quite popular, and they would still fall under active transportation as part of this planning effort. I also would like to define what complete streets are. So we have heard this term before. Rachel Flynn talked a lot about it. So it's really important to create that shared understanding of what that actually means. So it's of course it means accommodating all modes on the street. So that complete ability of all users, no matter how they choose to travel, to actually go along a road safely and comfortably. So that's pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, transit users, but also shared mobility users that need sometimes specific spaces, like a bike share station, for example, but then also places to rest. So having public spaces or little plazas, street furniture, benches, and that includes trees that offer shade and lighting. That really helps complete the streets with these extra amenities. Here's an example of a complete street. So you've seen some of these images, and it shows the pedestrian space, it shows the bicycle space, and the vehicles and transit users can still get from A to B as well, but you see the places to rest, the shade, and how different of an environment this in comparison to some of the streets we have in Fairfax County today. So why are those complete streets important? And Rachel gave a great presentation on summarizing that. So just to recap, they really create economic vibrancy and livability, great placemaking, but also they prevent crashes. They're just safer for everyone. And not only that, but they're also cheaper. They're often more narrow than our wider roads, so that is a cost saving in many cases. And they're just very comfortable to use for all users, but particularly pedestrian and cyclists. Then, of course, they are, they're just so inviting to use that they induce active transportation, which is good for health. Of course, if you're moving around actively, that's physical activity. If a lot of people do it, it creates public health benefits. And of course, the trees help with the heat island effect, as well as help clean the air. And if it takes cars off the road because there's this other option, it can also help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Here's an example of how a street that's very typical for Fairfax County, how it could be updated in a context-sensitive way. So it doesn't all have to be urban. There doesn't need to be, the store frontage everywhere. So it can be done in a suburban way as well, taking a more car-centric road to a more people-centric road, providing that that nice, comfortable space for pedestrians and cyclists with the places to rest, the trees, and the street lighting. So next, I would like to give you a summary of what we heard from the public, which basically founds is a foundation for the draft vision, goals, and objectives that I'm going to talk about after. So here you see a flyer we used to promote this engagement that happened in May, April and May this year. And we received a good amount of feedback. Over 1,400 surveys were filled out, either online or on paper. So we got a good amount of input there. We had 2 maps on our website that the community could use to add points, where they experience a barrier, so they could zoom into in their neighborhood, and if there was, a gap in the sidewalk, or a missing crosswalk, or some sort of barrier that prevented them from using active travel to get from A to B, they could add it to this map with a little comment. And the other map showed the plant network, and the community was able to add or propose additional trails, or where they could highlight streets where they would like to see these complete streets enhancement. And both of these maps are still open to the public. They can find them on our website, so we will keep them open for a couple of months longer to get more feedback. But when we wrapped up officially the public outreach process, we got nearly 1,200 comments on barriers, and over 400 comments on additional potential trails and bikeways and complete streets enhancements. We also hosted 12 public meetings where we had some really good in-depth discussion with the different districts in the county, and all of this ended up as the summary of what we heard from the community and the vision, goals, and objectives. So this shows the map where the community could add the barriers. You can see throughout the entire county, we got a good amount of feedback, and primarily barriers to biking and walking, but also some barriers to access transit, as well as barriers to accessing trails. This map shows the plant network, and then any trails that were, or bikeways and complete streets enhancements that were added. So if you go to this map and want to take a look, the solid lines represent what's currently on the comprehensive plan, and the dashed lines are recommendations that were added by the community. I just want to point out that those are not proposed trails yet. Those are merely suggestions at the time, and we encourage you to be creative and think out of the box. But of course, all of those additional trails and bikeways and complete street suggestions will need to be vetted throughout the process before they become a formal proposal that, of course, we will bring back to the public. So who did we hear from? So I want to give you a couple of statistics. So 75% of the folks that participated indicated that they do walk and bike regularly, either daily or multiple times per week. And walking was the most active, most common active transportation option. Nearly 94% of people that participated were walking regularly, but 64% also indicated that they ride a bike. The top 3 destinations that were named as part of this survey was the number 1, parks and recreation. Fairfax County has lots of opportunities to enjoy nature, or go to a park to throw a ball, or just get some fresh air, and that's really the top place people want to go, not using the car. And then the second most popular destination are one of the many trails in Fairfax County, and the third most popular destination were businesses, retail, and services, kind of like the daily destinations: grocery store, ice cream shop. Other destinations, of course, were, work, travel, transit, and schools as well. So we had an open-ended question where the public could just share their current experience using active transportation in Fairfax County. And the word cloud that was created based on the most common themes, show like a variety of feedback. Unsafe stands out, as well as that many of the facilities are disconnected, and that there are lack of sidewalks and maintenance, but that there are also good trails in some places, and they can sometimes be relaxing if you're on a trail in a natural area, for example. Then we asked about suggestions like, what would encourage you to use active transportation more? What would you like to see changed? And the three most common answers was just better connectivity and accessibility of sidewalks, and better street crossings, safer street crossings, the more frequent ones. Then the second most common response was better access to those trails and shared use paths that are so popular. And the third answer was more comfortable and connected bikeways. Then we asked about, what is your vision for active travel? And that really was a really interesting question, because that really informed the vision we developed as part of this project. So connectivity stands out, trails, crossings, sidewalks and lighting. So a lot of the complete streets and trail, that desire was clearly expressed in this question. And we asked to rank standard streets elements, and here we see the same theme. The most important aspect of a street was the sidewalks and trails, followed by crosswalks and bikeways, but also the buffer from traffic, and that the access to good bus stops. Then we asked about ranking these complete streets elements, those street enhancements, what is really important. And lighting was the #1 answer, both the street lighting and the sidewalk and trail lighting, which is at different levels. So street lighting is really high up, while sidewalk and trail lighting is a little bit lower to the ground and really lights up the pedestrian space, as well as trees, the public spaces, again, the places to rest, the street furniture. And we also had some images where we asked about how comfortable do you feel looking, imagine yourself walking down this corridor, what do you feel comfortable doing that? And this particular question was actually a comparison between two streets, which is actually the same street. This is Route 1. On the left side here, it's Route 1 in Fairfax County. On the right side, it's Route 1 in Alexandria. And even though it has very similar traffic volumes, the road feels very different. And you can see in the responses that few people felt comfortable walking along this design in Fairfax County, while the vast majority, 79%, felt comfortable along the same road, but with a different feel and different design in Alexandria. And we showed a different pedestrian facilities in Fairfax County and surrounding areas. And for example, here on the left, the major artery with lots of traffic and a standard sidewalk, even though there is quite a good buffer, only 13% feel comfortable walking along this type of road. Once a kind of barrier is added, comfort increases to 45%, but it's still not a very pedestrian friendly or human friendly environment. But here on this image, which shows more of a downtown area, complete street with the street trees and slower speeds and less traffic, it's, the comfort level is nearly, universal. 95% feel comfortable. In a residential area, of course, slow speeds, fewer cars, sidewalks are slightly more narrow, but it's overall a pretty good walking environment, which shows like 89% feel comfortable walking there as well. We also asked about trails, what type of trails people would feel comfortable walking on. The most comfortable one here in the middle is a paved trail through a natural area, not along a street. 94% feel comfortable. A little bit less in the natural surface trail, which can be a little bit harder to navigate for some people, maybe with walking issues or young children is a little bit more difficult, but still very popular, very comfortable, as well as a trail along a road, still quite comfortable for pedestrians to walk along here. Then we asked about different, comfort levels depending on the crossing facility or the location where they want to cross. So on the left here, we have a 4-lane road. Only 11% felt comfortable here without any sort of crosswalk. Comfort increased. So 4-lane road, but now there's a crosswalk and a refuge island where they could cross one line of traffic at a time, one direction of traffic at a time. Significant increase to 66%. And then even more on a 2-lane road with a high visibility crosswalk and extra signage. And that's actually a pedestrian activated light that flashes when somebody wants to cross. 89% felt comfortable here. On a major arterial with a signalized crosswalk, but also in unsignalized right turn lane that needs to be crossed, a wider crossing distance, only 39% felt comfortable crossing here. Comfort increases in a pedestrian bridge because that's a really kind of more highway type road in this location, crossing on this bridge, quite comfortable, 85%. However, a tunnel under a road that looks a bit dark, 50% felt comfortable here, probably because of personal safety issues potentially, but interesting to hear that feedback. And we also asked questions specifically about comfort of cyclists, and about nearly 70% of survey respondents indicated that they either biking or are interested in biking and were willing to answer those surveys. So the numbers you see here are not all respondents to the survey, just the ones that chose to respond to the biking part. So here we see the Paved Trail again, extremely comfortable, nearly universal, 97%. An unpaved, more natural trail, only 50% felt comfortable because, of course, on a bike, having this type of surface, a narrow trail, curvy trees is not for everyone, but still serves a good amount of users. Then we asked a question about bike lanes, on-street bike lanes, sharing, the road with cars. We can see here on the left where we only have, a shared lane. There's a center line in the middle, so cars and bikes truly have to share lane. Only 17% felt comfortable. In a different type of shared space where there are no markings on a very quiet neighborhood street, 35% felt comfortable. Then on a major arterial with an actual dedicated bike lane, but no buffer, only 16% felt comfortable using that type of facility. And in a rural area, bike lane, it's probably higher speed traffic, zooming by, not much separation, 34% felt comfortable. Then with separation from traffic, the comfort increases. So here's a buffered bike lane. In Tysons, 54% felt comfortable using that one. But then we get into the 80-90%, close to 100, when we take the bikes off street behind the curb on either like an urban trail, like a wider facility that's designed for both bike and pedestrian use, slower speeds. You again have the complete street here, 89% felt comfortable. However, when we separate the bikes from the pedestrians in those urban environments and give them their own space, but separated from cars and separated from pedestrians, 91% felt comfortable on more of like a sidewalk level bike lane. And then we also have two-way bike facilities behind the curb. Those are called two-way cycle tracks. They're a little bit wider, and so feel like a little bit more easier to navigate for beginner cyclists. And here we have, again, a nearly universal comfort level. So based on all that information that we received from the public, we developed these draft vision goals and objectives. And I want to go through those in more detail because this is really what we're interested in hearing about today, like what we heard from the public in the spring and what we basically translated that into. Does it resonate with you? Do you have any comments, any feedback, anything you want to see enhanced, anything that's missing would be really helpful for us to have. So here's the draft vision statement. So it reads: Fairfax County streets, sidewalks, bikeways, and trails are welcoming places where people of diverse races, cultures, incomes, ages, and abilities feel comfortable using active transportation to safely and conveniently access the widest range of destinations and to exercise, relax, or spend time outdoors. So I know that's a lot of words, and feel free to think about it. We accept feedback until September 19th. So if you feel like this is too much information, you would like to wordsmith a little bit, please feel free to send us your input after the meeting or in the next coming days via email or through our website. So here are the 4 goals that we developed. So the key kind of themes we heard from the public was that access and connectivity is a big issue, as well as safety and comfort. And then the bigger picture, livability and public health, as well as equity and social justice. So goal number 1 on access and connectivity, it is provide a well-connected multimodal transportation network that offers safe, convenient, healthy, sustainable, and affordable mobility options for Fairfax County. And there are several objectives under this access and connectivity goal. So the first one addresses the need for a comprehensive and connected network of sidewalks, bikeways, and trails, as well as complete streets. The next objective talks about the need to really make it happen, accelerate the implementation of the planned network, and that can be done through accelerated funding, design, and implementation strategies. But of course, we don't want to make it so cost effective that it reduces the quality of the facility. So we're trying to get to the good network a little bit faster. The next objective focuses on, while we are planning our capital projects here at the county, to make sure that we prioritize active transportation needs throughout all these planning processes, but then also on the private side, when private development comes in, that the active transportation needs are fully accommodated as part of those efforts as well. Another objective here focuses on more of a land use aspect. So we can build the best network in the world for active transportation. If you can't get anywhere from a transportation standpoint, it's helpful to reduce travel distances. So, changing land uses, and that's actually happening in many parts of Fairfax County and lots of our activity centers. They become a little bit more mixed use to make it easier to create these walkable places that you can just walk out of your apartment or townhouse or single family home and walk to your daily destinations like the grocery store or a cafe or schools or a place of work. And transit, of course, very important. The next objective focuses on the changes we see in the active transportation planning industry. So particularly when it comes to how we accommodate cyclists, it has changed a lot over the past couple of years. If you look at our 2014 master plan for bicycle accommodations, they were heavily focused on putting cyclists on the street, providing bike lanes for the most part, and you still see that happening today. But since we have shifted as a nation towards accommodating cyclists off street, because we realize, and as we see in our own survey here, that these off-street facilities are much more comfortable and appeal to more people. And then we have scooters that showed up and are increasingly popular, even though they have the issues. Those are new things that are constantly popping up in the active transportation world that we need to be able to, integrate accordingly and make sure that we remain flexible when it comes to implementation. The second goal focuses on the safety and comfort aspect. And as Rachel mentioned, it's extremely important to make our roads safer, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists that often are more affected and often rely on our active transportation network to get to work, to get to transit, particularly most vulnerable communities. So increasing the safety of active transportation and the comfort is really important. So the objectives listed under this goal focus on, the statement, we really need to minimize traffic injuries and fatalities, and we can do that through policies and programs. And Chris mentioned we're already starting to work on this list of recommendations as part of this ActiveFairfax transportation plan effort that will be published in the next couple months. That will be a step in that direction. Then we have a focus on reducing vehicle trips. So not just for environmental reasons or because we want to reduce congestion, but also because it increases safety, taking those cars off the road, converting them to other type of trips, either active transportation or transit. It just reduces the exposure rate, and safety in numbers is an actual a concept that has been proven where a lot of people walk and bike, that the awareness among drivers to watch out for active transportation users is much higher, so that makes it safer. And then the speeds, as Rachel mentioned, are really have a strong influence on how many crashes occur and also how severe those crashes are. Then, of course, a goal is to just reduce these conflicts that we see, the missing pedestrian crossings, or where users just are not designed to really mix, but they mix anyway, and prioritize the safety for active transportation users to recognize human nature. This is a location where pedestrians cross, even though it's not safe, and increase the safety of those areas. Then the next objective here is more of an evaluation piece. We need to understand why these crashes happen and monitor those crashes throughout the next couple of years to ensure that our countermeasures work appropriately, and also provide education. So complete streets and design elements are very important, but of course, we also need to create a safety culture and educate all users on how to be safe on our streets. And another topic we heard from the public that came up very frequently was the maintenance issue. So new facilities are needed, more facilities are needed, but also maintaining the ones that we have so that they can be used safely. The third goal here is about livability and health, and it reads: advance public health, sustainability, and quality of life by providing inviting sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that encourage frequent usage. And the objectives here focus on, again, the complete streets design, and we talked about, how that really helps induce walking and biking, healthier living, but also creates a healthier built environment that increases livability. But it can also be seen from it's great that we have all these roads. We need to make sure that when we build these new facilities in areas that are currently undisturbed, that we really practice environmental stewardship. And I know many of you are here today because you're interested in this particular issue, that when we construct a trail, particularly through an environmental area, that it's done in a very sensitive and deliberate fashion to not disturb environmental sensitive areas or habitats. Either reroute the trail around that, find a different alternative, or find a way to implement a trail that does not degrade the environment. And it's a complicated topic. But sometimes actually adding a trail can help protect the environment, not just to provide access for more users so they can actually appreciate it, because if they don't know about it, they won't want to protect it, but also to prevent informal access. So in an urban area, unless you put a fence around it, people will try to enjoy nature and they just go their own way. So giving formal access will help keep people out of the sensitive areas. Then another objective here is the reduction of speeds. And we have traffic calming programs that are done by the county and VDOT that don't apply to all streets, but their step, of course, an important step for communities to make the road safer. But there are many different ways a street can be designed in ways that make them just feel like you need to go slower or have an appropriate speed limit. That if the road is designed like a highway, it induces higher speeds. So there are design elements that can be added to provide that more visual cues that reduced speeds are appropriate, and that's particularly important in residential and commercial areas with high pedestrian traffic. And the last objective here is that we can use education promotional programs to highlight, the many facilities that we have or new facilities that we build, to encourage the usage of those, both just to have the full benefit of those facilities. And of course, during the pandemic, a lot of people went out to trails in the neighborhoods that they didn't know existed before. And we have never seen this much trail use of our network. But of course, there's always more to be done, and that we have opportunities to provide those events, for example, or promotional materials. The final goal is, last but not least, I want to say it's a very important goal, equity and social justice. So including the definition of equity down here. This is from this is the official county definition, and it's really that the community, everyone in the community should have the opportunity to fully participate in all the good things that Fairfax County offers, economic opportunities, and just live their fullest life, no matter their age, race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion. So all these different socioeconomic factors that could influence how much someone can participate and enjoy our life in Fairfax County. So the specific goal reads, provide a multimodal transportation system that prioritizes the needs of the most vulnerable road users, including communities of color, low-income communities, small children and their caregivers, youth, people with disabilities, and older adults. And I want to point out here the vulnerable road users. That's a technical term you may hear a lot throughout our future presentations. It refers to mostly people that are outside of cars. So they're more vulnerable to injury and death and traffic crashes because they don't have the protection of a car. But then they're specifically extra vulnerable people out there that they don't have a choice, or small children that don't understand traffic, and they're not as visible. So those are who we need to be particularly careful to design our road network for. So the specific objectives focus on the One Fairfax policy. If you haven't read that one, I definitely encourage you to search for it on the Fairfax County website. And it was developed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors to create certain standards and recommendations for creating a more just society in Fairfax County. And those policies we are striving to follow as part of our active transportation network development and implementation, as well as outreach. So the second objective here hints towards that, specifically that the public engagement is really important to really include and understand the active transportation needs, and that's utilitarian but also recreational needs of everyone that could use the active transportation network, the full spectrum of users. And then the last objective focused on the prioritizing the needs of those vulnerable road users, that and that's from a funding perspective, planning, engineering, throughout this provision of transportation facilities throughout the county, so we can provide this equitable access that's affordable and safe and comfortable and convenient to everyone, in particular the ones that need it most in the county. So that concludes my presentation. So now we would like to open it up for feedback. You can, again, use the Q&A function of this platform to ask a question or specifically comment on anything that was presented today, but hopefully specifically on the vision, goals, and objectives. And if you would like to ask a question verbally, you can press *3 if you're on the phone, or raise your hand and we will unmute you. You can also send us an email at ActiveFairfax@fairfaxcounty.gov, or send us a letter in the mail with your comments. The address is listed here on the slides. And if you go to the project website, there's a comment form that you can use as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. I'll give you a chance to catch your breath. I'll go ahead and jump right into a couple of the questions I see in the Q&A, and then my other staff person that's working with us tonight, Lauren Delmar, who's our host, she will also take it from here. So Kathy Ledeck asked a question or made the comment, please consider adding the word comfortably. So it would say safely, conveniently, and comfortably access. And that's a great point. Just to add to this, you know, comfort is obviously in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. And we had some great feedback in this process about what comfort means, and is it important, and ultimately it is. And if it's not comfortable, you're not going to use it. So thank you, Kathy. Irene Schubert asked, how does this mesh with the Embark plan? So what we're doing here tonight really should mesh with all of our plans. Embark is for the Richmond Highway Corridor. If folks aren't aware of it, it's part of the plan for development in that corridor, with providing bus rapid transit system that would allow for additional density around the bus rapid transit stops. And so even though that planning effort is fairly recent and fairly modern, as are some of the other plans in other parts of the county, the effort we're doing here tonight is not going to redo that, but it's going to inform that. So when decisions are made moving forward, the feedback that we get and the policies and the guidance that come out of this process are going to help all of the staff and the decision makers come up with the best outcome for the Embark areas as well as other areas. So Lauren, what else do you have?
Sure. So we have a few housekeeping things. First of all, we've been asked to let you guys know that the raise hand feature is not in the same location as we mentioned. I guess it's different for panelists. So it's actually on the right side of the screen under the participants pane. So it covered that. And then someone asked why they can't see all of the participants, and that's just a feature of WebEx that only the panelists can see. That right now we have a total of 52 participants. We had a maximum of 55 at one point. And then let's see. I had a couple other kind of housekeeping ones. See if I got them all. Oh, will the presentation be available following the meeting? And yes, it will be posted on our website. So we're going to try to cover any of the vision and goals questions first, and then move on to any additional questions. And if there's location specific questions, we are going to save those for last. So I'm going to go through some of the Q&A questions that are vision and goals related, and then we'll move on to any raised hands that are vision and goals related. So if you, unless you have a vision and goals question at this point or comment, please lower your hand until we kind of move on to more general comments, because we want to make sure we're covering that as our primary purpose of our meeting. So one of the questions is, the vision is fantastic, but does VDOT share it?
So I can take this one. Of course, this will be a a shared process with VDOT. We are working closely with VDOT. VDOT is attending tonight to listen in the conversation, and VDOT is a great partner in this effort. Of course, they own the roads, so everything we do needs to go through VDOT. But of course, as a state agency, they work at a slightly different level, as well as speed as the county. So I can say we will continue to work with VDOT on any of the goals and objectives, and particularly the safety issues moving forward.
And I'll just add that similarly, another question was asked about several goals and objectives mentioning reduction of traffic speeds and whether the Fairfax County Police Department is on board with those goals, since we're kind of tackling the other agencies at this moment.
So Nicole, if I could weigh in on the VDOT piece, and I would say that VDOT is evolving, and we are working very closely with them in numerous corridors throughout the county. They have agreed to study lowering the speed on Richmond Highway. They have agreed to allow us to design our projects for a lower speed in anticipation of that. They have agreed to some innovative measures that they haven't used before, such as leading pedestrian intervals and rest and walk techniques. So I would say that we still have work to do, but VDOT has definitely been receptive to some of the newer techniques and some of the newer approaches to bike and pedestrian issues. And that's important because VDOT does own the roads, and we need their cooperation to implement the vision that Nicole has outlined as part of this plan. And in terms of the police department, we also work with the police department regularly, and they do help us with crash reconstruction and trying to identify ways to avoid accidents in the future. And Chris may want to talk to that a little more detail.
But actually, Tom, I just wanted to introduce you. I apologize. I did not introduce you at the beginning of the evening. Tom Bashadny is our director of the Department of Transportation, and we thank him for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
Great. So we have a lot of positive feedback on the vision and goals. Let's see. I have one. I completely support the ActiveFairfax goals. Good work. Is there consensus on the term that we should use in place of the level of service standard and instead supporting complete streets? I think I'm interpreting that correctly.
I'll take that. So we are developing in the county as part of Rachel's presentation. She made the point that we have had a working group that's been working to come up with an alternative measure of effectiveness that captures the same concept of level of service, but for pedestrians, for bicycles, and for transit vehicles. And so we've had a working group with VDOT, and there are some examples from other states and jurisdictions around the United States, but there's no one size fits all solution. So we are absolutely looking to find out what the alternatives are, and that is still a product that is under development and will be forthcoming in the future.
But that is a good point. Whoever posed the question, that should be part of the objectives and goals, that we either replace or provide additional ways to measure our streets. I think that would be important to put in the comments, and we can look at adding that as an objective or goal. Thank you.
I think there may be more than one measure. I don't know that there's a single measure that meets all the objectives that we might be trying to achieve here in Fairfax.
Yeah.
Okay, so seeing a lot of location-specific questions in the comments, I'm going to go ahead to the raised hands now, and then we'll go back to the comments for some more non-vision goals related questions, and then we'll move on to any location-specific questions. So I'm going to start with Bruce Wright. I'm going to unmute you, Bruce.
Hi there, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I have actually two questions. So the first, Nicole, you mentioned the need to prioritize the improvements in such a large county as ours, and I agree with that strongly. And I don't think we did that with the first bicycle master plan, but I didn't see that wording in the vision goals and objectives, and I'm wondering if that needs to be added. I saw a lot of prioritizing strategies for doing various things, but I didn't see the comment that we should come up with a prioritized list of these improvements. Do you think that should be part of phase one, or will that be part of phase two?
Well, that's a great comment, Bruce. It will definitely be part of phase two, but there's also, it's good to mention it. So thank you for bringing up that topic, and we'll take another look to see if that can be better integrated.
All right, thank you. And then the other comment is, the vision, goals, and objectives are excellent, I think. I really like the work that you all did. I wanted to see the action items and the evaluation metrics, and I saw that they were mentioned but not included. So I'm wondering if they were intended to be part of phase one, and if not, and I assume they're not now in phase one, that they will be an early part of phase two, or how will that work going forward?
Great question. So we will definitely work on those in phase two, early on in phase two. But we made the decision to get the vision, goals, and objectives refined and approved first before we start to develop the underlying action steps and metrics. So, for example, today you mentioned we're missing, the goal on prioritization or an objective on prioritization. That way we can make sure to include action steps under these key issues as well.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, now I'm going to go to Philip Latassa. I'm sorry, I can't see your last name.
I would like to say, well, let me mention I'm with the Friends of Acadine Creek. I would like to say that environmental goals and climate change, certainly not the least of them, deserve to be a goal unto themselves rather than just one objective. Indeed, what is the ultimate purpose of ActiveFairfax if not to achieve the overall environmental goals of the citizens? While I've been sitting here listening to the presentations, I have drafted some environmental and item 5, goal 5, environmental stewardship and climate, and I'm going to put that in the question and answer window for the benefit of everyone participating. I wouldn't expect you to address all the individual points.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please feel free to share in the Q&A. Unfortunately, that's not visible to everyone else.
I can see it.
Yeah, as a poster you can see it, but only the panelists can see it. So I don't know if Lauren can read it, if it's.
I can see things that other people have put in there.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Oh, I don't know if everyone can. Maybe I'm special. I don't know.
No, I think it's if I mark it as answered, then you can see it. So I can go ahead and mark this as answered so that everyone can read it.
Thanks, Lauren. And thank you for the input. That's very good input.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the Q&A. I have a question. To achieve the goals stated here tonight, both VDOT and FCDOT need to adopt an urban street design that is not usually in the VDOT toolbox. Reston apparently has achieved an MOU that achieved that goal. I believe that it should also be an objective of ActiveFairfax.
Yeah, I'll take that. Actually, Reston isn't the only place. We actually started this in Tyson's, and we've developed this in Reston, and that's that's exactly the kind of work that we're doing here tonight. So ultimately, the buy-in that we've gotten from VDOT in those areas that are the most rapidly urbanizing, such as Tyson's and Reston, ultimately can hopefully get us to a point where in the future we can have some sort of countywide understanding with VDOT. So we've so far handled these on a case-by-case basis, and we continue to have positive results in doing that. But we do want to be able to have these type of urban standards available to the entire county where appropriate. Obviously, we're a very diverse county with rural low density areas, and that's not appropriate in those places. But thank you. That's a great point.
Another question. Nice aspirational document for sure. It seems hard to measure success. Can specific numbers be added to be more actionable and used to get resources?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So that was the item that Bruce was hinting on earlier. We will develop specific action items or actionable items under each objective that will also have metrics attached that are measurable. And that will happen as part of phase 2. Once we have gone, refined the vision, goals, and objectives and got those approved by the Board of Supervisors, we can then start to refine and develop those measurable outcomes that bring the high level goal down to something we can measure our success at.
What is the percent breakdown of purpose of single occupancy vehicle rides? It seems this plan is heavy on recreation rather than work commuting.
So from an active transportation perspective, about 80% of all current trips are for recreational purposes. And that's, of course, something which is great. I mean, we want our public to enjoy trails and sidewalks recreationally. But if we want to achieve a mode shift and reduce congestion, reduce single occupant vehicle use, we do need to bring that share up of utilitarian trips that are done by an active transportation mode up through some of these objectives we stated today, through better street design, land use changes, and some of these encouragement efforts that make people aware that there are other options. So the county has a TDM program, a transportation demand management, that also works with employers on encouraging choosing different ways to get to work. That includes, of course, transit, but also teleworking. So that's definitely something we will focus on in the plan, but we need to strike a balance between both the transportation and the recreation aspect.
Enforcement was mentioned prominently in the one-word question by the public, but not included in the vision's goals and objectives. I understand that safe street design is the ideal, but think that speed and other traffic enforcement is important as well.
And that's a good observation. Enforcement does play a role, but we still need to further develop what that will look like, particularly from an equity perspective. You may all be aware of Black Lives Matters movements and some of the equity concern around enforcement, some negative unintended consequences. So that's one of those issues that nationally we're struggling with right now, what the right approach is. And that includes active transportation safety, road safety in general. So we don't have specific action items yet because we are monitoring closely what's happening throughout the country to see what the best practices are, and those are still developing. So keeping that in mind throughout the next 2 years, we will and beyond, we will need to adjust to what the best recommendations are, and also have those conversations with the community, and particularly the African American community, through the next outreach phase, which will focus on the Safe Streets for All program recommendations, where more specific recommendations are included that you don't see in this document. But as Chris mentioned, we have this document of the 60 recommendations. Some of them do include enforcement, and yes, it's very important, but a work in progress at this time.
But I would add real quick, a lot of what we're focusing on is actually changing the built environment. We don't have enough police to be everywhere, even if we wanted to do enforcement. And however, if we build our roads in a different way, or we change the roads that we have into a different type of road, then hopefully there's not a need for enforcement because the drivers will be driving differently. So that's a great comment. We absolutely realize that enforcement is part of it, but a lot of our focus is on the built environment that we can change as we move forward.
I'm going to go to Mike Doyle on the phone. I'm going to unmute you.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'm as far as somebody just came into my office here. On the question for the goal 3, you have reduced speeds as one of your goals. I was just wondering, and by the way, this report is very, very good. I applaud you on that. But you, in the initial draft of your plan, you had ASCs or speed cameras. And in the more recent draft, you seem to have dropped that. Did we read that correctly? And if you did drop speed cameras, why? If it's done equitably, why?
Thank you, Mike. So that goes back to my previous answer of we learned after we included this recommendation on speed cameras. There was a Vision Zero conference in DC where we heard from the African American communities that cameras of any type may not be, a good use, could be seen as, as a negative consequence for the community. There are also some issues with the accuracy and potential, tickets that are incorrectly issued, leaving particularly low-income folks with, bills that they may not be able to pay. So that is one of those developing discussions at the national level that we're closely monitoring. So the signs seem to be out on how effective these actually are on fulfilling the needs. Sometimes they're seen as revenue generating. That's another problem. So there's a lot of controversy among those. They can probably be used correctly, but it's one of those issues that we kind of are holding back to actually make the sort of formal recommendations until we learn more about how those affect our African American community specifically, but also our low-income community. And if this is really, where we want to focus, or if we rather should focus our attention on self-enforcing streets and the street design changes that are needed.
Okay, so Bruce Wright would like everyone to know that for those interested, police will discuss crash reconstruction at the FAB meeting next Tuesday. We have a question. What measures are in place to continue executing and improving ActiveFairfax 5, 10, 15 years from now? Phrased another way, what is the sustainment plan to ensure ActiveFairfax continues growing and touching all parts of the county even after the highest priority / visibility projects are completed?
So the plan is really a multi-year plan. So infrastructure improvements take a long time in the county in general. It's not a 5-year plan where the higher priorities can be checked off pretty quickly. It will take, in particular when it comes to the physical infrastructure on the ground, it will sometimes take decades to even implement the high priority projects, unfortunately, because funding is limited and the need is so great throughout the entire county. They're missing sidewalks in the older parts, wider roads and some of the newer parts that need to be addressed. So there's so much need that it will take a while to work through our priorities, but it's also important to stay flexible, and we will revisit the plan every few years to make sure it's accurate and go through, the prioritization, as well as the transportation priorities plan that the county develops every few years to have public outreach and develop separate lists of priorities. So those will inform each other. So there's always, room for the flexibility, but to answer your question, it will take a long time to work through this. I wish it would be quicker, and we need to worry about what is next, but it will take a good amount of time to really make that change we want to see.
I'm gonna go to Matthew Henry on the phone.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. Excellent work. I'm a relatively new Fairfax citizen, and it's literally the best place I've ever lived in my life, and I just love it, and I love what you guys are doing. I just have a really quick question to, I don't need an answer tonight, but just something to consider. I commute to work just about every day by bike, and most of that bike is through Fairfax County. It's very it's very doable, and I really appreciate the fact that I can live in a place that I can do that. The one thing that you mentioned tonight, you talked about the multimodal vehicles, and you gave examples of scooters. I'm wondering, one of the biggest things I face on my commute both ways each day is, and this is going to sound funny, but speed limits or rites of passage on the trails or on the various places that bikes can go. For example, there's my pedal assist bike has a max governor of 20 miles an hour, and there are places like in Arlington and other places where the law actually says you have to have that kind of governor on your bike. But many times we get accosted by scooters or other electric vehicles or even electric bikes. And so just something I'd love to see you consider in planning for this is reducing speeds on where the cars can go, but also thinking about speeds where people would normally think that they can ride their 40-mile-an-hour electric bike down that trail. So just a comment for consideration.
Thank you. That's a great point. That is actually coming up frequently as part of our work. The friction between slower and faster trail users, particularly, or people riding on the sidewalk, which is legal, but of course our sidewalks are so narrow that it's not a great mix. So one way this can be addressed is by providing wider trails. So the national standards are going towards wider and wider trails because of to provide wiggle room between those different fast-moving active transportation users. Speed limits have not shown to be particularly effective in encouraging, just similar to drivers. If the trail design tells you can go this fast, people that can go this fast will go this fast. So one way to address this, for example, is to have a lower speed design trail. If you don't want to, have high speeds in, say a neighborhood trail, maybe more narrow, a little bit more winding with the lower design speed of maybe 10 miles per hour. And even if you can technically go this fast, you probably won't go this fast because the built environment tells you it's not safe to do so. If you have, a major commuter route like the WD that is very popular, and we really want to encourage, the use of these routes for commuting, and high-speed commuting is part of that, particularly with the rise of e-bikes and e-scooters. The recommendation could be to separate those faster users from the lower speed users and have a separate facility for pedestrians and very slow cyclists versus the high speed users that can have their own way. So those are the cycle track designs. In other countries they're called bicycle superhighways to really encourage the fast mobility that active transportation can offer, but it shouldn't be to the detriment of pedestrians or other users. So there are design ways of dealing with that. But again, speed limits are not necessarily the most effective way of slowing trail users down.
We have a question. We get constant signals that sidewalks and paths are second-class uses. Sidewalk ends in a construction zone, path covered in cut grass. Can maintenance be added?
So maintenance was a topic that came up over and over in our public outreach. As staff, we are aware of the many calls we get about maintenance. So that's a somewhat of a constant struggle because funding is not necessarily available to either VDOT or the county to maintain the sidewalks and trails to the condition we would like them to be in, because we have thousands of miles of sidewalks and trails and just not enough funding to do that. So that's one of the recommendations that we're moving forward through this effort to, make that's really a safety issue, but also a comfort issue and a key issue that wasn't necessarily, as part of previous efforts, it wasn't highlighted as much. So this is a key piece of the ActiveFairfax transportation plan, is to highlight the need for maintenance, but also determine who is responsible. So there are trails and sidewalks in Fairfax County that don't have any assigned maintenance responsibility. So that's something that we need to fix, and that will be a recommendation as part of this effort. So it's a complex topic, and we are definitely trying to include that. And I think there's one recommendation in there among the goals and objectives that maintenance is a key point. So thank you for bringing that up as well.
Okay, so we're going to need to wrap up soon. So I'm going to go to one more question, and then I have two more hands from George and Paul. I also want to say that there's been a lot of feedback on automated speed enforcement in the Q&A, so staff will take a look at that. Thank you for your comments on that. The last question from the Q&A we'll address is, does VDOT and FCDOT intend to stop road widening while the study is being completed and changes recommended implemented? Does that make sense to you, Nicole?
Sorry, say that again.
So I think the question is asking if road widening projects will be put on hold while the study is being completed.
I can take that, Nicole.
Thank you, Tom.
So in a county as big as Fairfax County, there's a lot of different transportation needs. And so I guess the short answer to that is no. There are going to be ongoing projects that do involve road widening. There's priorities that have already been approved by the board and are in process, but each of those projects does include bike and pedestrian facilities, or in some cases rebuilding bike and pedestrian facilities. Any design that we're doing, any design that VDOT is doing at this point does incorporate bike and pedestrian facilities. And obviously we look to things like the current bicycle master plan that's been adopted and the trails plan that has previously been adopted to identify, what those facilities are. The ActiveFairfax plan is going to refine those, combine those into one document, which is going to actually make it a lot easier. But there are a variety of transportation needs throughout the county. And so we will continue to pursue those in parallel with the ActiveFairfax plan.
Thank you. So now I'm going to go to George and then Paul. And I also just want to add that there are several more questions that have been asked that are location specific, and staff does want to address those on a more one-on-one basis. So if you can contact us directly, that would help to avoid taking up everyone's time here for those location specific items. So I'm going to go to George now.
Hi, my question, I'm George Ledeck. My question is, what criteria and procedures will you follow to screen proposals for new trails from an environmental standpoint? I've looked at those interactive maps, and there are a lot of proposals for new trails, some really good ideas, and at least a few that I think are highly problematic, with trails proposed through extensive floodplains and RPAs and Fairfax County parks with sensitive natural habitats and rare species. So could you please describe the process that you'll be using in phase 2 for vetting these proposals to ensure that you'll be true to your objective 3.2 of environmental stewardship? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, George. I'll take that. I mean, we've matured a lot in how we develop projects in this county, and each and every project is a learning experience. We first of all are sensitive to the landowners, which typically in our county is the Fairfax County Park Authority. The way that our county has been planned and developed, we've set a goal, and we've almost achieved that 10% of the land in this county is Fairfax County Park Authority, and we absolutely defer to their expertise in what the best way to approach the idea of a trail in a park. On the one hand, the parks will tell you, and Nicole mentioned this, that a trail can actually reduce the impacts to the park because of the 1.2 million people that live in the county that get out and trample things. It's actually better for them to not trample things and to be on a designated facility. And when facilities are built, there is disruption when they're built, but then nature comes back and grows back, and within a few years, the trail actually feels and looks like it fits and was there the whole time. But we certainly defer to their expertise, and we have no interest at all in destroying some of the incredible park assets that we have in this county. So, as I said, we've matured in the way we approach projects. For years, we've contacted our urban foresters to discuss, what is the impact of a proposed project, what are the mitigation measures that we can do to reduce those impacts, and we've continued to mature that process to include our stormwater folks and others, so that we really do the right decisions when it comes to environmental stewardship. On the other hand, as Nicole pointed out, that access to nature is truly one of the things that our citizens cherish. When we get input from, when Park Authority gets input, Park Authority's done surveys about, what's the number one thing, what are the things people want? Number one thing is trails in their parks, and the mental health benefit of being able to be in nature in a stressful time like we're all living today is not to be dismissed. So all of these things play into what we're trying to do. It's on the one hand, if people don't know about the environment, the next generation of environmental stewards, might not be created if we can't take our kids into the environment and show them how important the natural world is. And we're so lucky in this county that we have so many opportunities to do that. And so I'm not giving you a hard and fast answer here, obviously, but we've continued to learn and mature on how we would approach this. And ultimately, again, I can't see us ever making a move that the Park Authority or anyone would deem to be completely environmentally destructive. We have engineering techniques that that we use to solve some of these problems. But ultimately, the answer simply might be that it's not an appropriate location for human incursion, period, let alone construction.
And then our last question is from Paul.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's been very enlightening. Just shortly, one of the things is in the goals, don't know how to work this in, but shared streets imply respecting and considering others. And that seems to be a problem throughout that I think you're trying to address on how to evolve this, because specifically pedestrians need to be protected from cars, but also from bicyclists. And this is one of the problems because people tend to lump bicyclists and pedestrians together. And the pedestrians really need to be protected from the bicyclists and also the scooters as they increase in speed, as someone has mentioned. And so therefore, there was you asked the bicyclists, what do you feel comfortable with the sidewalks? I wonder if you had gotten the same response asking pedestrians, would you feel comfortable sharing it on the sidewalks with bicyclists? Some places it works, other places it doesn't. It's a conflict that's kind of built in to the system you're creating here. The other one is complete streets, which is an embark, which has been discussed. And I think embark is a very good example of what happens when you put everything in and you do complete streets. It becomes so monumentally wide. So I think in the future, embark will be viewed as an example of how not to do complete streets. And from that perspective, I think that's a shame that it's not been going to go through this process that you guys have done, which is a very good one. Thank you.
Thank you for a comment on the importance of recognizing the pedestrian, needs. And we really try to strike a balance in this plan between pedestrian needs and bicycle needs. So we had the bicycle master plan and we had a trails plan, but we really didn't have a pedestrian plan. So we're adding a strong pedestrian element to ensure pedestrians are accommodated and comfortably and safely throughout the entire network. And that sometimes means, providing facilities that can be safely shared, or when there's a lot of pedestrian activity, that pedestrian cyclists have to be separated. That doesn't mean the cyclists have to be on the street, because that's really not where they want to be in most cases, but to provide a safe facility for both bikes and pets. And if there's a lower pedestrian volumes, like in our more rural or suburban areas, a trail can accommodate bicycle and pedestrian shared use much better than a narrow sidewalk can. And again, bicycle riding is legal in Fairfax County on all sidewalks. And if the sidewalks are designed so narrow that they can't be safely shared, that's really to the detriment of the pedestrian. So having wider sidewalks and shared use paths that are appropriately designed to share between different modes, it really helps. So having bike lanes, in theory, it seems like, okay, this is where the cyclists should go on the pedestrians off street, but many bicyclists just don't feel comfortable, as we've seen in the survey, to be in the bike lanes and ride on the sidewalk instead. So we need to be realistic about where people want to be and provide the safest and most comfortable facility to avoid these type of conflicts and create a safe and comfortable environment for everyone.
But Paul, what were you referring to when you said it's not a complete street with Embark?
No, I said the Embark is a complete street.
Oh,
and
okay.
The problem is when you put in everything, as you add on all the elements, it becomes very, very wide.
Yeah.
And so Embark then is going to be an example of what happens when you try to put all the elements in the way they're doing it. Because it's a very wide, and then it kind of destroys the entire essence of creating a sense of place when you have a 13 lane road going right through the middle.
No, but the typical section is 10 lanes. The 13 is what we're looking at to see if we can bring that down. But 10 is typical, so 3.
But
Oh,
10 is still a lot. 10 is
Oh,
still
I
a lot.
I agree, but you could, it's more the through lanes that are, we could have 2 through lanes in each direction. It would be better, but anyway, that decision was made many years ago.
Oh, I know that. I'm just saying that Embark is an example of complete streets. When you put all the elements in, it becomes very wide, and care has to be taken so that it doesn't destroy the intent of the and purpose of it.
Right, but I would say it's not because of all the elements, it's because so much is given to the car.
Well, that's kind of one of the things I was trying to allude to. I was saying,
Oh,
in order to, if you go to the examples you used in the very beginning,
mhm.
one of the things that Alexandria very consciously did was to narrow the streets.
Yep. We're working on it.
And I would add real quick, you know, the challenge we're facing in the Richmond Highway Route 1 corridor is that it is an arterial. In fact, it's United States Route 1. So this discussion came up at our Trails, Sidewalks, and Bikeways committee, and it was actually very similar to your comment that if we make this attractive place with all of these elements, do we run the risk of attracting too many cars? And in the Richmond Highway corridor, of course, we're trying to create these places where there is an arterial where cars move through. So in places like the development around the Reston metro stations, or in Merrifield, or in Tysons, we've absolutely achieved these complete streets that are, you know, comfortable, walkable, and all the elements that we've talked about tonight, because they don't have a United States arterial running through them. So that's really the challenge we're facing on Richmond Highway, and we know that it's difficult. We're doing our best. We're studying reducing the turn lanes and doing everything we can to come out with the best outcome. But in Fairfax, you know, the geography that we're given historically and today, we are still a jurisdiction that has routes that run through it from the outer jurisdictions to the nation's capital, and we have to solve all of the issues that revolve around all of that.
Right, and to that end, we're trying to learn from Alexandria and Arlington because they have the national highway as well. So we're trying to see what's possible.
Great. So thank you so much for all your comments. It was a great discussion, and I think we got a lot of good feedback. If you have any other thoughts you would like to share with us, and please take some time to look at the vision goals and objectives. They're published on the website, and a summary of the feedback report as well if you want to compare. We accept comments until September 19th. So we can wrap up this outreach effort and present what we heard to the Board Transportation Committee. So please take a look and let us know. If you have any other questions, you can always reach us at ActiveFairfax at fairfaxcounty.gov as well. If there were a couple of location-specific questions that we would be happy to answer, so please feel free to reach out. So I would like to thank Rachel Flynn and Tom Bichatny and Chris Wells for joining us tonight as well. And Chris or Tom or Rachel, any closing remarks?
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I know your time is valuable, and to spend 2.5 hours talking about active transportation really means a lot to us.
Agreed, and we really appreciate your feedback and continued comments. So please share your thoughts.
And I would say the same thing. I've done this for a long time, and out of 1.2 million residents, we appreciate your all's involvement tonight. We know that some of these discussions we're having are difficult, And nonetheless, the feedback that you're giving us, the participation that you're giving your time for is truly critical to help guide us into the future. So thank you again.